Hey guys, today it is Luke chapter 21. So we're still on the Tuesday of the last week of Jesus's life. Remember, Sunday would have been Palm Sunday. Monday was the clearing of the temple. Tuesday, there was a lot of teaching going on in the temple. And then we're going to see today, he leaves the temple, heads to the Mount of Olives, and teaches his disciples about the end of the world. And then it kind of ends Tuesday in the book of Luke. And we see that while he's in the temple, probably sitting in the court of Gentile, in the court, and there would have been a place, the treasury is right inside of the court. And so this is where everybody goes and takes their offering. And so he sees what's happening and uses this as a perfect illustration to teach his disciples. And he looked up and he saw a rich man putting gifts into the offering, and he saw a poor widow putting in 2 small copper coins. Now, we don't know, it doesn't tell us what the rich man gave, but we assume it's more than 2 copper coins. The copper coins is also known as the widow's mite elsewhere in the Gospels. But that copper coin, that mite, is 1% of a denarius. A denarius, if you remember, is a day's wage. So let's say that you make $50 a day, right? And so that means it would be, you kind of have that 50 cents, right? It's not a lot. And so you kind of have, it's just 1% of a day's wage. And so this widow puts in 2% of a day's wage, but it tells us that it is all that she had, right? So just imagine having 2% of just one day's wage, not a paycheck, just one day. And she gave it all. This is a perfect place to say that God doesn't care about the amount. Okay, we can see that here. It was all about the heart. The same in our spiritual gifts and the things that we do for the church and for our brothers and sisters. God doesn't care about the amount that you do. He cares that he has all of your heart. Are you living fully for God, or are you living fully for yourself and giving God out of the abundance of things that you have? Which is what this rich man does. He has his own businesses. He's doing all kinds of stuff. And so what does he do? He just throws God a little bit. It doesn't matter that he's rich. He's just throwing God a little bit, the leftovers, where this woman is giving the first, giving it all, and she's taking the leftovers, right? And so we see that Jesus says that the widow has put more in. She has done the good thing. And so while they were speaking on the temple, we talked about a lot of this on this past Sunday and this Sunday morning. They were leaving the temple and they were heading to the Mount of Olives. So they're walking out of the east gate of the temple. They go down a small valley past the Garden of Gethsemane, which had been a big olive garden, and they start heading up to the Mount of Olives. So if this is Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives is a little bit higher, and you have a little valley here. It's called the Kidron Valley. But to walk from the temple to the Mount of Olives maybe would take you 20 minutes, maybe. It's just because of elevation. It's kind of, you have to walk uphill. You're going up a mountain, but you're already on a mountain, so you kind of come down a little bit, and it's just a walk up. It doesn't take long at all. Walked it several times myself. And so these disciples are leaving out of, and Jesus is leaving out of the east gate. So they're passing past the temple wall in the temple, and they're just amazed about how they are. And we talked about that this Sunday. Remember, the rocks of the retaining wall were 40 feet long, 12 foot wide, 12 foot deep. Some of them weighing 40 tons. And so 400 tons, sorry, not 40 tons, 400 tons. And so these big white marble slabs of rock, and then the temple just covered in gold and beautiful. And it's written to be said that it was the most beautiful building that's ever been built. Just ornate. Everything was to God. Herod's temple was amazing. And as they're walking past this, they're just in awe, right? Remember, I mean, all of these men have come to Jerusalem many times, at least 4 times a year, ever since they were probably 10 or 11. And so they've seen this temple many times, but they didn't spend a lot of time there, right? They spend a lot of time in Galilee. A lot of them lived in the Galilee region. So you take like Peter in Capernaum, James and John lived in Capernaum. And so you kind of have that they came, but even when they come, you're just like, wow, this place is amazing. This is just something that they've never seen anywhere else. Even though they've seen it many times, it's still breathtaking, right? If we fly today and you see to Paris and you see the Eiffel Towers, or you see the White House, or you see the Grand Canyon, or you see just something that's amazing. And even though you've seen it once or twice, you're just like, wow, that's amazing. That's exactly what the disciples are doing. Jesus, look at this temple. Look at these rocks. This is just beautiful. And Jesus says, well, I'll tell you that this temple is going to be torn down, and not even 2 rocks are going to be standing on top of each other. And I told you Sunday that the temple had a golden top, and when Rome destroyed it in AD 70, they torched the temple. They threw a torch in, not meaning to, but they did, and they caught the temple on fire, which melted the gold cornice on top of the temple, and it ran down through all the cracks. And so as the Roman army came in, they wanted the gold, right? They were greedy. And so that's actually why they tore down the temple, to follow all the veins, all the cracks that all the gold filled in. And they got a lot of that gold out. And so that's why they actually destroyed the temple. They had really nothing to do with tearing down the temple, but they did. And so they're saying, wow, this is amazing. And Jesus says, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be torn down. Now, remember, the disciples, this is not what they want to hear. They're expecting Jesus to set up his kingdom. He is the Messiah. They're expecting him. Remember, he just rode in on the coat, and they're expecting him to say, I am the Messiah, and be transfigured like he was on the Mount, a transfiguration, and to set up the kingdom of God. And he needs the temple to do that. And here Jesus is saying, well, that temple is going to be torn down. What? That's crazy talk, right? This doesn't make sense. But he says that it's going to be torn down. And he goes on. He says that he starts giving a lot of signs. And the disciples ask, so when and what is it going to look like when you set your kingdom, right? When you come back, what is this going to be? What is it going to look like? And he gives us lots of signs. I won't go over them in great detail. If you're watching this and you wasn't with us on this past Sunday, I encourage you to go back and watch last Sunday's sermon. I spent great detail about this list, about channeling out what this is going to look like of end times. And so basically there's going to be a lot of false teachers coming, a lot of false doctrines. There's going to be wars. There's going to be famines. There's going to be pestilence. There's going to be earthquakes. There's going to be different terrors and signs. There's going to be all kinds of things happening. But that's only the first half, right? And then Luke doesn't mention it, but we see in Matthew and Mark, we see the abomination of desolation, where there's going to be somebody who stands in the temple. So it's going to be destroyed, but it has to be rebuilt. And somebody's going to stand in that temple and put a false idol in it and make the world worship him. Or her, I guess. I guess it could be a girl, but I doubt it. It'll be a man. But he's going to have to do that. And then he says, then after that, it's going to even get worse, right? We're going to see verse 12, people is going to lay their hands on you. They're going to persecute you. They're going to deliver you. That word deliver means to arrest. So it means that you're going to be arrested for being a Christian, for being a follower of Jesus. And not only are you going to be arrested, but then you're going to have to go before synagogues. So the Jews are going to have to go. The believing Jews of Jesus are going to have to go into Jewish courts. And then we will have to go into Gentile courts, which is regular courts, regular courts and governments of today. But it's interesting. We see in verse 13, it says, this will be your opportunity to witness, right? Even though all these bad things are happening, God still loves them. God still wants them to hear the gospel. He's still giving them a chance to repent and to follow him. He promises that he'll give us the words to say when that happens. And then he says you'll be even delivered up. You'll be arrested. That's that word again, right? You'll be arrested by your parents, your brothers, your relatives, your friends. Even the people that are close to you are going to turn you in because there's probably going to be rewards. There's going to be all kinds of things going on in the world. That's how much the world is going to hate Christ. And because you are a Christian, a little Christ, the world will hate you. And that's what it says. You will be hated for my name's sake. It's not that they'll hate you individually. They'll hate the Jesus that is in you. And in order for them to get the Jesus out of you, they got to kill you. And that's just the way it is. But in verse 18, it says, but not a hair of your head will perish. Oh, you're going to die. Whoever's left, they're going to die. They're going to be persecuted. We're told in Matthew that the tribulation is going to be so great. When it says that, but not a hair on your head will perish, it means eternally perish. That even though you might die physically, you will not die spiritually or eternally. That you have Jesus in you and you are safe. And then it goes on and talks about when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you'll know that the desolation has come. That's that person we were talking about, the abomination of desolation, the capital A Antichrist. And when that happens, it's time. It's about to get real. But notice it says when Jerusalem is the epicenter, even though in our American minds, we think America is the best and everything revolves around us. When the end times come, America will be a part of it, but Jerusalem, Israel is the center. Everything rises and falls on what happens in Jerusalem. It's the epicenter, and whatever starts there will spread throughout the entire world. And so when that happens, when you see the Antichrist in the temple, when you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, he's saying all those who are around Jerusalem and Judea, it's going to be bad. The prophet Zechariah tells us that of all the Jews that try to escape Jerusalem, 2/3 of them will die. And 1/3 of the Jews that try to escape will be held supernaturally, protected by God, on the east side of the Jordan River in some place. Now, we don't know what that means. It's kind of an interesting idea that we see in the book of Revelation. But for somehow, God is going to protect them. I don't know if he's on a force field, invisible. We don't know what that means. But for some reason, that Satan and the world cannot get to them, which is just kind of interesting. It makes the mind think, what does that mean, right? So everybody's going to flee. It's going to be really bad. People are going to die. They're going to fall on the edge of the sword. They're going to be like captive among the nations. They're going to be trampled. And then during that end of the half, right? So you have the first half, which is 3.5 years of the wars, the famines, all of those. Then you have the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist. I call that the halftime. That's what I said Sunday. It's the halftime show. And then after that is the second half, which is the worst half, right? And so that second half comes, and there's going to be signs in the suns, the moons, and the stars. There's going to be so many cosmic things going on. It's going to mess up the tides. If it messes up the tides, that means it's kind of messing up gravity somehow, which is kind of interesting. It's going to mess up how the world reacts and how it acts in seasons and days, the length of days. It's going to be interesting. It says, for the powers of heaven will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming on a cloud. It's going to last for 3.5 years. God promises that, 1,260 days. And then what happens? Jesus will come back the second time. And so he will come back. He will touch down on ground. The church will come with him. All believers will come with him. And he will set up his millennial kingdom on this earth. And for 1,000 years, Jesus will reign with the Christians on this earth. And so that's what we're reading. And he says, what's interesting, it says, you'll see the Son of Man coming. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up, raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Your salvation is coming near, talking to those Christians who are alive in the tribulation. And then we see the parable of the fig tree. If you read the Gospels and you put them in chronological order, he gives several parables of this fig tree on Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday. We don't know if he talks about it on a Wednesday. It's really kind of hard to figure out what he does on Wednesday. But basically he says, just like this fig tree who who blooms and has leaves in the summer, you know the fruit is about to come. He says, so too is it like the Son of Man. When you see all these bad things coming, you know that the Son of Man is coming. And in verse 32, and it says, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all this has taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. He's telling us to be ready and to look. But when he says this generation, he's not talking to his generation. He's not talking to the disciples, because all of the things that we just read would happen has not happened. And so he's talking to the generation that sees that tribulation, the generation that sees the abomination of desolation, the generation that goes through all that. You're going to see. The Bible, when it talks about a generation, it talks about a 40-year period. And so then that's even today, we kind of do that. A generation is about 40 years. And then the next generation, even though that generation's still living, kind of leadership takes over and it just picks up. And so he's saying the generation that sees that tribulation will not pass away. Because why? Because the tribulation is only 7 years, right? So when you start seeing that, you know you're getting close to Jesus coming back, and you know it's going to be close to the end of the world. But he ends with the lines of watch yourself, lest your hearts be laid down with drunkenness, the cares of this way. Always be on the lookout. Don't let your life get covered in sin, but stay awake at all times. He's not telling us to be insomniacs. He's telling us to always be looking for Christ to return, right? Nobody knows the time, the minute, the hour that Jesus will come back, right? We have a season. We can kind of see. We know when the fig tree starts to bloom. When we see all the signs of the tribulation, we know it's close. When we know when it's close, that we should always be looking and waiting, ready for our Savior to come back. There's a whole lot there. If you want some more explanation, make sure you go and watch Sunday's message. I give a lot more detail. Or you can just ask questions on Facebook, online, YouTube, or just text me, call me, whatever. But I hope that makes sense. And that concludes really the day of Tuesday. And so we will start Monday on chapter 22, which really picks up Thursday in the last week of Jesus. As I said earlier, we're not sure what happens on Wednesday. There's not something that is very particular. It says this happened on this day. Some people have some guesses, but the best is, I think he was just praying. He was getting ready because he knew he was about to go to the cross. And so that was Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would say is a day of rest and prayer, getting ready for what's going to happen. And then Thursday, we come to the Last Supper, we come to the garden, we come to the arrest, we come to the mock trial, and we will get into that Monday in chapter 22. God bless.